All right, well, good evening, fine fiddly folks. It is another episode of the Discipleship Webcast. And Courtney, what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about kingdom finances. Yes, again, so exciting. Can't
Saving
wait.
and investing.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome. So get comfortable. We're talking future. We'll be back in a minute. Here's the welcome.
Something I gotta tell you, so get ready for another breakthrough. So let me show you what I mean. Cause what I got is the new thing. Listen up, I'm gonna say it all right now.
Awesome. Well, what are we celebrating tonight, Courtney?
I'm celebrating Mohawk region for flexing their serving muscles, serving hot chocolate to people downtown Hamilton on Sunday, which is great. So cool.
And I see that happening multiple days a week. I'm celebrating the Discipleship / Church Planting International Seminar that we're doing on Friday evening. It is a free event that is now sold out. So if you wanted to be a part of it, too bad, there's no more room. You can still sign up. We'll just do it again some other time. But I'm pretty encouraged with the number of people that are interested in seeing simple churches on campuses broader than even just Canada.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's more people interested in going far from Canada than there is in doing churches here in Canada. But
Maybe.
we'll take what we can get.
Yep, for sure. I'm also celebrating how we're handing out double the care packages for Operation Study Stockings. So double the care packages from Treat No Trick, which is really cool. I can't wait to get my region involved with that.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Well, we don't want to hog the celebration train, so we're going to add a few more cars to this train. So here is Tara, Kaifa, and Nicole bring in their celebration.
Hey church, I just wanted to celebrate the Guelph region today for the way they've been making meals to support an international student who has to quarantine since they just arrived in Canada. Also want to shout out to Stephen and Severin from Waterloo for also taking this opportunity to serve and joining us as we do that.
Hi church, I just want to celebrate how beautifully and how wonderfully God is moving in the lives of the students at York University. Every time our simple church gathers in person at the Student Center, we consistently run into a first year whose name is Jonathan, and he joins us for worship and huddle. I think the first time that we met him, we were in the middle of worship, I had my eyes closed, and when I opened my eyes, I noticed a new person, like he just floated right in, and he was worshiping along with us. Students like Jonathan show us how important it is that we are physically in the campuses that we are serving.
Hey church, I'm Nicole, and I'm so excited today to celebrate Wenbo, Tuyu, Shane, and Carol for translating the Christmas story into 3 different languages for us. These stories are going to serve as an incredible resource to help us as a church be more equipped to evangelize to international students and to share this beautiful, beautiful story of Jesus' birth with them.
Hey Sophia, welcome. So happy to have you here. I can't wait to talk to you. How are you today? How's it going? Yeah, me too. Me too. So some questions for you about the 4 Queen server. So how did this server form?
So this server was formed out of the webcast series Freedom from Vices earlier this year. And yeah, just seeing Levi creating the Overcoming Lust server for the guys, I know he really encouraged us females to do one. So I really felt led to just create this space for females to share their own experiences with freedom from vices. And yeah, just encouraging the females in our church that their brokenness is allowed here. And just with the name for the queen, just came from 1 Peter 2:9. I'll just read the scripture quickly. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. So yeah, that's where the 4 queens came from.
That's awesome. That's great. And what fruit has come out of the server so far?
So much. Like, just earlier this year, just the conversations that started to happen. It did take some time, but just after one person did it, it just became like a chain of other females just sharing their experiences and what they're going through. So yeah, that has been so awesome just to see people being vulnerable with each other in all regions. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. It's super encouraging for sure.
Yeah.
Great. And how has community been formed or strengthened as a result of the server? What would you say?
I want to shout out Queen Philly and Queen Annie for just facilitating the pre-show with the movie night last week Friday. It was so awesome just seeing
That's
all of
great.
us from all across all regions just coming together. And yeah, also want to shout out Emily just posting in the activities chat about December. So yeah, definitely check out the activities chat for that. And yeah, just again all the conversations that has been happening, really seeing the community coming together.
I'm so excited. That's great. Yeah, I can't wait for our next either movie night or whatever we're going to do together. It's going to be great.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And how can people join the server?
That's a good question. So I'm thinking more simple church leaders are in that server. So feel free to talk to them to join or just message me so I could share the link with you. But I also just want to encourage all the girls who have shared or who wants to share their own stories that don't just stop there, but also talk to your simple church leader or simple church just for further discipleship on the things that they want to share or have shared already.
Thank you so much, Soph. That's really encouraging. And yeah, I can't wait to see what other fruit comes out of the server. So I'm going to pray for you and then we'll just say bye. So, dear God, thank you so much for Sophia. Thank you for the wisdom that you've given her and yeah, just this excitement that she has for the server, God. I thank you so much that we have an opportunity as a church just to come together and share experiences there and be vulnerable and encourage one another and just have fun also with one another, Lord. Yeah, God, I just pray for even more fruit to be coming out of this, for more people to be connected, yeah, and just for more encouragement for Sophia. Just keep that going, God. Yeah, Lord, thank you so much for what you're doing, and we can't wait to see just what more you're going to do out of the server. So thank you. Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah, amen. Well, I'll see you later. Thanks so much for coming
No
on the webcast.
problem.
Bye.
Bye.
Great. Okay. So I can go now. Okay. Now we're going to go into multiplication power-ups.
What's up, church? My name's Steven. This is Severin, coming at you from the Waterloo region. We just finished going over the super easy radical generosity budget guide for Severin for the next 4 months. Sev, what did you get from that?
Okay, so what I get is like basically it's simple. You just have to put everything in their boxes, and you just have to have your calculator on your hand, and I calculate the tax from what you have from your monthly income. And that way I can, like, I know what I'm giving and what I'm receiving and what I'm saving. Because like before, I'm just gonna go with the flow and like spend what I have. That was bad. But then now I know how much I have to give, how much I have to receive, like how much I have received, and how much I have to save.
Hi, my name is Ruth and I attend Brock University, and the reason why I find daily devos so valuable is that it creates discipline in my life by allowing me to get into God's word every single day. I also like how we're not only just passively reading verses and passages, but we're actively reading them by trying to apply the verses to our life. And another reason why I like the daily devos is because I'm able to share ideas with other people and hear their perspective on God's word.
Now let's go to our daily devo reading with Amy.
Hey church, my name is Amy. I'm from the York region, and today I'm here to share with you my daily devo reflections from John 17, 1-26. There are 4 truths that stood out to me from this passage, and so I'm just going to list them off. The first one is that it allows us to understand the Trinity and the perfect love between the Father and the Son. Second, through this perfect love, Jesus dies on the cross out of obedience to the Father so that we can be redeemed from our sins. And this completes the work that he was sent on earth for. Thirdly, we belong to God before we knew him, before we were his followers. And through this love for us, we can be united with other followers in Christ. And lastly, all of this so that we can be made known to God and that we can understand God's immeasurable love for us.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Discipleship Webcast. Tonight, we are on episode number 4 of our Kingdom Finances series, talking about how do we view our finances from a kingdom-first perspective. We talked about budgeting and accountability, how finances are not an individual thing, they are a communal thing. We talked about the negative power of debt, how the basis of a strong financial future is getting ourselves out of and staying out of debt. Last week, we talked about the foundational building block for our finances, which is actually generosity. And it's really important because generosity is the basis on which we build strong finances. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? Well, what we're going to do today is we're going to now talk about the second building block of strong finances, which is saving and investing. Now, I do believe generosity is more important than saving and investing. Jesus does teach that it is better to give than it is to receive. But saving, make no mistake, is critically important. Saving and investing are foundational aspects of healthy finances, and I'm going to help you understand why. So let's go back a little bit, though. Let's go back to what debt is. Debt, as we defined it, is stealing from our future to pay for our present greed. Okay? So debt is stealing from our future to pay for our present greed. What's saving then? Well, saving and investing are like the opposite of debt. So saving is being generous to our future selves by being content in the present. Do you see how saving and investing is the kind of the opposite practice of debt? It's saving and being generous to our future selves by being content in the present. Now, Jesus says something very interesting when it comes to treasure. He says, do not store up treasure. And I want to start with this verse because I think that this verse actually lays the foundation of why we save and why we invest. Matthew 6:19 says, do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Jesus very explicitly commands us to not hoard, to not store up for ourselves, accumulate stuff for ourselves. Saving can be a really necessary, or is a really necessary and an important aspect of healthy finances, but if we are not careful, it can actually be a destructive force in our lives. And I want to address that first by making sure we understand what saving is not, or bad reasons to save. And I want to give 2 reasons not to save. These are reasons you should not save. We're going to go for reasons why you should save and invest, but here are 2 reasons why you should not. 2 dangerous motivations. The first is that of fear. Fear is a terrible reason to save. A fear that we will not have enough is a poor motivation. If fear is our motivation for saving, what it really is saying is that our saving is a kind of control. Or said another way, our saving is an attempt at us being God of our own lives. When our saving arises or comes from a place of fear, it's an indication that we are grappling for control and we are grappling to be God or authority over our own lives. When it comes from a place of fear, when we save, even though it's a good action, it's actually coming from a false sense of security. And the truth is that saving from a place of fear will always leave you feeling like you're in a place of lack. When you save because you are afraid of the future or trying to control the future, a great word for this is stinginess, and we're going to come back to stinginess because it has a cousin which is closely related as a second bad reason for saving. So our first bad reason for saving is we don't save because we're afraid. The second reason we don't save is we don't save because we're greedy. Good old-fashioned greed can motivate our desire to save. We can simply want to, if we're honest, many of us simply want to acquire more for ourselves, gain more, possess more, have more. Greed or covetousness, the desire for what other people have, are really poor motivations for saving. Some of us save because greed rears its head in stinginess. Instead of being generous and compassionate to those who have less, our saving causes us to look at them with pride and with greed and say, why should I give out of what is mine? You see, when we save and it causes us to think that somehow we are better because we have saved, that's greed. That's pride. And this is why generosity is more important than saving. Because what generosity does is it positions our heart to love and respect and cherish others first. Then when we save on a generous heart, our heart is oriented to others. So as we acquire, as we gain, we're able to be generous with our savings, generous with what we have, as opposed to greedy, stingy, and selfish with what we have. So saving is actually a really necessary and important thing. We're going to talk about why in a minute. But I want to caution us to not save out of greed and to not save out of fear. All right, so let's talk about 3 good reasons to save. Good reason number 1 is that saving is wise. Staying out of debt is perhaps the most important financial principle that we can live by, practically. That and those 3, avoid debt, be generous, and save. But in order to be generous and in order to save, we have to stay out of debt. But in order to stay out of debt, we need savings. And this is why. All of us will reach a point where our ability to cover a cost with our monthly income is going to be too great. There's going to be things that happen, there's going to be costs that come into our lives that we simply cannot pay with what we make in a given month. So in order to pay those things, we need savings. Otherwise, we're going to have to take on debt. Savings allow us to avoid going into debt when circumstances arise. So for example, your car will break. It's not a question of if, your car will break. You will want to go on a trip to see a family member. You will need to replace an appliance or something in your home. You will eventually drop your phone and break the screen. It's going to happen. And when those things happen, you can either pay it out of debt or you can pay it from savings. And remember, we want to avoid debt. So we have savings because it wisely anticipates that what we make in a month is not going to be enough to cover unforeseen or even planned expenses. This is perhaps the most practical reason to save. We all know it, but we often don't do it. And so I'm just going to simply say, saving is wise. It is wise to save because unexpected and expected costs arise that we cannot pay for. And if we don't want to pay with debt, we must pay with savings. Number reason 2 to save is that we value our future. If debt is stealing from our future, saving is generosity to our future. So what this means is that when we save, we are saying that we can picture. Every time we save, it's like a little statement that says, my future is going to be bright. We're quite literally saying that our future is worth preparing for and investing in when we save. So for example, if you want to own a home one day, you need a vision for the fact that you could own a home. So you have a vision that says, I'm going to own a home one day. It's a bright vision. It's an exciting vision. So I'm going to save for that future. You're going to say, I have a vision for being really generous one day. And I'm going to save so that I can be generous. If you want to have a bright future, you need to and have access to things in the future financially, you need to deny yourself and be content in the present. Leslie Newbigin, one of my favorite theologians, said this: without a vision for the future, responsible action in the present is impossible. So when we save, we're saying we value and cherish a future. Now, really practically, at the end of our lives, what this means is that all of us are going to get to a point where we're not able to earn an income when we're old. So you're going to get to maybe 70, 75, 80, whatever it is. You're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to generate an income. Now, as Canadians, we do have Canada Pension Plan, but it's not enough to pay for a reasonable standard of living. And so if we're going to actually be able to care for ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves and have a bright future when we can't earn an income anymore, we need savings to help pay for that. Now, to be clear, I don't like the modern idea of retirement. I think we've been sold a bit of a lie that what we need to do is save lots of money so that we can waste the final years of our life doing nothing meaningful. That's really the lie that is sold to us, is save now so you can waste your final years doing whatever it is you want to make yourself happy. No, instead what we want to do is we want to prepare for a future when we can't earn an income so that we can continue to be fruitful in ministry and fruitful with our lives. Saving for when we can't earn in the future, for retirement, quote unquote, isn't so that we can have a luxurious retirement. It's so that we can be fruitful on mission. Similarly, if you have children, saving for your children's future, for example, putting money into their education savings plan, is a way of valuing their future. I save for my children because I value their future. Now, some of you might be saying, I don't have kids and I'm like 21 years old and I'm not worried about my retirement. I'm going to teach you why you should be worried about your retirement, why these things matter. But really simply, we save because we're taking responsibility for ourselves in the future, because we value our future. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 14 says this: for children ought not to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. This is Paul's way of saying, hey, parents, you got to take responsibility for your lives. When you're old, you're responsible for yourself. Take care of yourself in the present so that your future self can continue to be generous. Another way of putting this is you save so that as you move through life, you can be a blessing financially to others and not a burden. As you go through life, you want to move into a future where you can be a greater financial blessing rather than a burden to others. You have to take responsibility for your future financially. And so saving is a way of taking responsibility so that you can be a blessing. Number 3, this leads to the final good reason for saving, which is maximizing our generosity. Good saving is the basis for good generosity. Why is that? Well, number 1, because saving is the basic requirement for avoiding debt, and debt is the enemy of generosity. Secondly, good saving and what accompanies it, investing habits, will increase your ability to become financially flexible to be radically generous, especially with larger sums of money. So if you want to be able to give large sums of money, you need to save and learn to invest now so that in the future, you actually have resources with which you can be have larger resources and greater capacity. Now, I want to clarify one thing here. We don't save so that we can be generous in the future. We must be generous in the present and save so that we can be generous in the future. You can't, for example, you can't be stingy in the present and say, well, I'm just going to save everything now and in the future I'll be generous with it. Our saving must be coupled to generosity. And that's why really practically I would recommend that we aim to save and give roughly the same amounts. Depending on our income. Laura and I personally, right now we give a lot more than we save just because our income's a little bit lower, but we try to aim to give and save as much similar amounts. Okay, so really practically, how do we save? Well, it starts with contentment. I cannot say this loud enough that the basic foundation for saving is not having a desire for that which you don't need. You must train yourself to be content with what you have. Without a genuine contentment, saving is basically impossible. So you have to learn to say no. Practice that no word. Everybody needs to learn to say no more. No. When an ad comes on, just say no. Just say no. Just say no. Learn to be content. Okay, number 2. Really practically, how do you save? Well, you need to set up savings accounts. Yes, you need dedicated savings accounts. Your savings should not be in the same bank account as your primary spending. You want to move money out of your primary spending account as much as possible. Why? Because if it's in your spending account, you're going to spend it. So your savings account should be a separate bank account or a separate set of accounts. And what I would actually recommend is setting up three different types of accounts. But before I do that, I want to explain that there's 2 basic types of savings accounts. There's what we call like a bank account, and then there's what you call a registered account. So a registered account is a special kind of account that has benefits from a tax standpoint. Now, it's very complicated. I'm not going to be able to get into all the details, but the 2 primary ones are the tax-free savings account and the registered retirement savings plan, RRSP and TFFA. TFFA, RRSP. Now, those 2 accounts are designed for long-term savings, and then there's our bank account. Now, with those 2 different types of accounts, I would recommend having 3 separate savings accounts. 3 separate savings accounts at a minimum. Laura and I actually have more than this, but I think as an individual, I would recommend starting with 3 separate savings accounts. So you have your checking account, that's where you spend from. Account type number 1, you want a flexible and emergency savings account that's likely with your bank. So this is where you can put funds that you need if your car breaks, or if you break the cover on your phone, or if you're saving for a trip, or if you're saving for Christmas presents. Like, this is your short-term savings. Kind of think of it like every year type thing. This is a bank account, and you want to just be filing a little bit of money every week into that. So what Laura and I do, we have a little hack. Every time we use our debit card, automatically our bank account puts $5 into that savings account, and it adds up. And over time, so when I buy a $1 coffee, it actually costs me $6 because $5 goes into savings. And having that little flexible and emergency savings account is a really good tip. Account type number 2 is you want to have a long-term savings account. So this is where a tax-free savings account is a really good tool. This is where the money that you put in that account can grow when you invest it without having to pay any tax on it. This is really great for larger purchases and long-term investments. So if you are saving, for example, a larger expense in the future, for example, a renovation on a house or a car that you want to buy or education, these sort of those big ticket items, this is where your long-term savings. You only use it for planned purchases or major emergencies. So you want an account that's dedicated for your long-term savings for planned purchases. Your third account is you want to make sure that you have a retirement account for when you won't have an income. And this is where the RRSP is really the game changer. Now, the benefit of an RRSP is it's also really a great place to save for a home because you can take the money out and use it for a home. Very technical, not for this talk. But you want to have those 3 accounts. So think of it this way. You want emergency, long-term, and retirement. Those are the 3 big buckets you want to be saving into, and you want to be saving into all of them. Okay, so how do we save? Well, very simply, automate it. Make it automatic. Just like you're giving, you want to automatically be depositing money every month into your savings accounts. So just like you give, you're going to give automatically and you're going to save automatically. Don't do it manually. You will forget. So what I do on the first of a month when I get paid, automatically, most of the money that I get from a paycheck is automatically gone. It goes to giving, it goes to savings, and it goes to my mortgage. So very quickly, my money is distributed, and so that it all has a purpose. All right, number 4, how? This is really important. This is where it gets really interesting. Invest. Okay, invest. It's not enough to just save money and put it in a bank account. You need to invest your money. Just because your money is in a savings account or in a registered account like an RRSP or a TFFA doesn't mean that it's invested. They're just accounts. They're just holding the money. What you do with the money in that account is totally up to you. And you need to invest it. I want to teach you why. Investing grows your money. An investment is a tool that allows your money to grow without you really having to do anything at all. Investments operate on a similar principle to debt, but in the opposite direction. So instead of paying an interest on your investments like you would a debt, you get paid, or it grows in value at a certain rate of return. Let me show you why this is so important. If you put $10,000 into a savings account at 25 years old, and you just leave it in a savings account, you leave it in your RRSP, you leave it in your TFFA, or you leave it in your savings bank account. By the way, your savings bank account functionally has no interest rate. Savings bank accounts are not investments. If you just leave it there at 65 years old, 40 years later, you will have $10,000 basically. Except because of inflation, it'll be even less than that. However, $10,000 invested at 25 years old for 40 years until you're 65 years old will become $100,000 on a 6% return, which is fairly conservative. You can see your finances grow 10 times in 40 years by doing nothing and just leaving it there. This is the basis of good saving, is it's invested savings. So a reasonable return that you can expect on a sort of a reasonable saving or investing strategy is about 6%, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the year. This is really important for your long-term and your retirement savings, those second two categories. You want to be investing those. They should be invested so that they have time to sit and grow in value. It takes time for finances to grow in an investment. For your emergency savings, those can just be in a bank account. That's okay. You don't need to invest those. They're not going to be there long enough for an investment to yield any kind of return. Now, when you're investing, I want to give you the most important principle. Start early, start today. A lot of people think that if they just, whatever, who cares? I'm going to be 65. It doesn't matter. That is really, really dangerous thinking. The best time to be saving for your future is when you are young. The younger you are, the better it is. So for example, if you put that same $10,000 into savings, you say, whatever, I'm just going to buy whatever now and I'll put it in when I'm 45, once life is stable. Well, it will only have 20 years to grow, which means that $10,000, instead of being $100,000, will only be $32,000. A significant difference. The funds that you save in your 20s are the most important funds that you can save. Most people don't have funds for retirement, not because they didn't save later in life, but because they didn't save early in life. Start today. All right, so where should you invest? You're like, I don't know, what do I do? What if I get ripped off? I want to give you a few tips, a few suggestions. To be clear, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm by no means an expert. I don't claim to be, but I do have a fair bit of experience managing finances, both for businesses, obviously for charity, and also personally. And so I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing, but please understand I'm not giving you financial advice over the webcast. In a formal sense, I'm just making some recommendations, and I would encourage you to contact a financial professional for concrete advice on this. But to help you get familiar with where you can invest, I want to introduce you to 4 different ways you can invest. The first is in what's called a guaranteed investment, also known as a GIC. Now, GICs are guaranteed. What this means is the money you put in, you're guaranteed not to lose your money, and you have a guaranteed return or range of return that you'll get after a set period of time. Typically, these are with banks or with the government. GICs are good if you really can't afford to lose any of the money, or you want it to be very, very safe. But they have very low returns. Like right now, 1%, maybe 1.5%, maybe if you're lucky. Very, very, very low returns. But they're very safe. The second place you can invest is in traditional places. So this would be with a bank through a mutual fund, or if you work for a large corporation, they may have a managed RRSP that you can contribute to. So this would be like Sun Life would be a brand you may have heard of, or something like that. Now, these mutual funds and managed funds like this tend to be better returns than a GIC, but still pretty conservative. So they're very safe. They're very conservative. They require very little financial literacy, and they're very easy to set up. You just contact either the bank or a provider of these things, like Sun Life would be an example. Or if you have a corporate RRSP, that sort of thing. Very safe, very easy to set up, not great returns. Okay, on the far other extent of the spectrum is you have what's called self-managed investing. This is where you set up an account and you buy and sell either funds, which are collections of stocks, or stocks. So you buy companies. You're going to go buy a Facebook stock, or you're going to buy this stock or that stock. To be clear, this is the most risky way to do it. And if you're not willing to roll up your elbows and really get into it, I would strongly recommend not doing this. It is quite risky, and you really need to be willing to assume those risks. That said, you may be able to get higher returns, but it might just be down to luck. So this is if you do it yourself. You can do it yourself. You can set up an account, but be very, very careful when doing so. The fourth way you can invest, which is quite new and is really actually kind of cool, it's called computer or robo-investing. And there's different companies that provide these things. But basically what it does is computers can invest on your behalf. They have algorithms to determine how to invest. And it turns out that computers are actually very good investors because they're not emotional. And so they can be very, very consistent. And so major investment companies have been set up around this idea of automated investing. And it's really actually proven to be quite an excellent way of investing. Two companies that supply these are Wealthsimple and Questrade. And the cool part with robo-investing is that you can set what risk level you want to take. You can go very safe or very risky. And as a result, the returns can be very small or larger depending on how much risk you're willing to take. And so for a lot of people, I think that robo-investing is actually quite a good place to start if you're willing to do a little bit of research to understand how to manage your own investments. So those four ways you can invest: safest, GIC; middle ground, old school mutual funds or with the bank. You can also go it yourself, self-managed, very risky. You really have to know what you're doing. Or you can set up an automated investing portfolio that requires some literacy, but you basically just turn the dial on how much risk you want and the computers do it for you, which is very cool. But the key of good investing is start early, start now, and save into those three buckets: emergency, long-term, and retirement. I encourage you to think about those things. To help you process further, I'm going to pass it over to Courtney, who's going to walk you through a couple of exercises. If you have questions, please drop them into the chat, and we'll talk about that after Courtney's done. You can drop them in now, and I'll take note of them. Back in just a second, Courtney.
So that was really helpful information from Robin, and maybe for some of you it was a lot of new things. So I just want to encourage you to write down any questions and then put them in the chat later, just so you don't forget. Robin went through what saving is, being generous to our future selves by being content in the present, and then he went through those steps of how to save, why we should save, So we're going to go through an activity, but we're going to switch gears right now, and I'm going to talk about exercise. And right now I'm going to tell you some reasons why you should exercise, because it's good for your health, it can improve your sleep quality, reading my notes, it can lower your risk for certain diseases, you can socialize, it can be fun. There are so many reasons why you should exercise. But a really important question that you could ask me is, why do I exercise? Like, why is it important to me? What motivates me? And we can ask these same kind of questions with saving. So maybe by now, especially if you're taking notes, you could explain to someone why you should save. You kind of know the points to say, right? Why you should save, why it's a good idea, it's wise, it's preparing for the future and whatnot. But can you share why you want to save personally? What's motivating you? So a question to ask yourself could be, what's holding you back if you don't want to save? Or if you've already started saving, why? Why do you do it? What's hard about it, for example, or what's easy about it? So these questions might be hard to answer right away, and one strategy to help with that could just be writing down 1 to few words that come to mind when you think of the whole concept of saving. So when I think of saving, I think of blank, or I feel blank. So just take a second and write down what you think or how you feel when you hear the word saving and you start to think about that. Maybe it's your future, or fear, overwhelmed, or what you're supposed to do, or maybe something you want to save for, like a car or a house. Whatever it is, just take a second and write it down, or type it down, either one. Feel free to put it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, give you like 5 seconds to do that really quickly. All right. So once you've got those words written down, ask yourself why you wrote them. So why did these things come to mind? What motivated you to feel that way, for example? So hopefully just by doing that, you can start to see what's motivating you to save or not save, what's kind of blocking you or hindering you. And I want to encourage you guys just to invite God to wherever you're at with that. If you're saving out of fear or out of greed, that's something you just got to acknowledge and then ask God to come into it, right? So yeah, you could pray something like, God, help me save out of wisdom, or my value for the future, or maximize my generosity, just change my heart and mold my heart. So yeah, I'm just going to encourage you guys to look back at this in a while, tomorrow, a couple days, and just keep thinking about it. Keep thinking about why you're saving, what's motivating you, and keep praying about it. And just asking God to come and just partner with you as you do that. Okay, so Robin talked about contentment. He discussed savings accounts, investing, automated saving, a bunch of different things that each of us can do. And I want to ask you guys right now, what is your next step? So it could be really easy to leave this webcast and this great teaching and say, yeah, my next step is to save, which is great, but it's not extremely actionable because it's not specific enough, right? So I'm just encouraging you guys now to think of an actionable step that you could take depending on what you wrote for the first part, how you feel and think about saving, or anything else. So for example, your next step might be just making a budget. If you haven't made a budget yet, make a budget. You could have that section for savings, right? Your next step could be talking to someone about opening a savings account, who you're going to talk to. Think about it. You could, maybe you already have a savings account and you want to set up automated savings. You want to set that up in your account where it just automatically goes into your savings account. That could be something that you look into. Maybe you want to take time looking into investing, right? It's not just something you can just automatically like, oh, now I'm investing. You have to take some time, look into it, and research and ask people, right? So that could be a step. Maybe you can take some time looking into it. Maybe you can ask someone who you know is investing. You could ask around, see if anyone in your simple church or district leaders have some information about that to help you. That could be a step. You could just want to have a conversation. Having a conversation could be a step with someone about saving, about investing, about saving accounts. So having a conversation could be a step that you could take. Yes, so just take a minute, think about a step that you can take from this webcast that really just fits into where you are. It doesn't have to be something really grand. It can simply just be having a conversation or looking into something or doing some research. So take a step. take a minute to make a step. Okay, so hopefully you have some ideas in your head about what you can do. Next thing is, when is this happening? When is this step that you've created happening? Are you doing something tomorrow? Are you doing something over the weekend? Is this, are you planning a conversation? Can you text someone right now and figure out when to talk? So just encouraging you guys to really make this happen. Don't just make a step and leave it and forget about it, because that's so easy to do. Really make a step and think about when it's happening. Okay, now that you've done that, hopefully, or you're thinking about that, share it with someone. So share your ideas, share your step with somebody. It could be someone you're watching with right now, could be someone in your simple church or your district leader, whoever. Just share it with someone. Let someone know what you're trying to do, and they can help you keep accountable. They can also just encourage you. They might have some resources or help or information that you didn't know they have. So just think of someone to share with and share with them. Share what your step is. Share what you're doing. Share how you found this webcast, what you're encouraged by, how you can encourage others. Okay, so we're gonna just finish off with a couple practical saving tips, just some things that you can start doing right now, tonight, tomorrow. First one is just, I wanted to emphasize again to have a budget, because it's really important. So that's a tip. Really get a budget if you don't have one yet. Do that. Next one is just to make saving a habit. Now, one idea I got from someone is to use an app that rounds your purchases to the nearest dollar and puts the difference into your savings account, which is really cool. So if you buy something for like $1.80, for example, that 20 cents will go into your savings account. And then over time, it will just collect and increase, kind of like what Robin was talking about with $5 of his purchase going into his savings account. So that could be something that you look into in the App Store, just really quick search. Another one is just thinking of an expense you can eliminate and save that amount. So maybe you have a coffee or something every day or every couple days, and that amount that you spend, put it in your savings instead. Or, I don't know, going grocery shopping, if you don't have a list, or if you don't know what you're making, you can just easily buy a bunch of things. And so maybe making a list and making sure you're not buying, everything. But you could also just choose something to eliminate. Maybe you don't really need this thing that you get that's just adding to your budget. You could choose that thing, take it away, put it into your savings account, the money that you'd spend on it. So those are the 2 tips I have. If you're watching and you have tips that you want to share, please share them, put them in the chat, share your wisdom, share your knowledge. Just the experience that you have or any tips that are helping you right now, just put them in the chat, because they'll definitely encourage others. Along with that, let's get your questions in, because we're all done. So any questions you have, put them in the chat. See you soon.
Awesome. Well, thanks for walking us through that, Courtney. Appreciate you. Get your questions in. Lots of great questions in already. So let's dive straight in. Gordon asks, is a house an investment or does it detract from potential growth in savings? Because I can see that a value of a house and so on and so forth. Basically, is a house an investment? The answer is, in almost every case, yes, a house is a pretty excellent investment. I have, to be honest, made technically more money financially in my homes than I have in any other means of investing that I've done. But there's this concept of, I'm going to introduce a word here and then I'm going to define it, if I can.
Go ahead.
A very important concept called liquidity.
Okay.
So liquidity, or if your money is liquid, it means how easily can it be turned to cash. So stocks, mutual funds, etc., they're quite liquid. They can fairly easily be converted to cash, which you can use to buy things. But a house is very illiquid. You live in it.
Yeah.
You can't just sell it and turn it to cash without creating a lot of other problems in your life.
Okay.
So houses are great investments. You can typically do quite well in compared to the market. For example, I've done much better in my homes, but you can't sell your home. The other challenge with homes is that they also cost money to upkeep, right? So they're a very complex, what technical word here, asset. They're a very complex thing to own, and so in most cases they are a good investment, but they're kind of a mature investment, and I think they need to be coupled to a good like RRSP or TFFA and cash-based savings, because you can't sell your house to pay for your broken telephone.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So did you want to tackle one of the questions?
Sure. I'll look at Soph's question right now. So it says, how do you save and invest while paying off debt? Which is a great question because I think a lot of us, like me, are doing that. And one thing is just having that budget and knowing how much to put in each section and making sure that you still have enough to, pay your monthly expenses and do what you need to do, but you're also putting a little bit in debt repayment, savings, and investing. So it's not unwise. Is that a word? Yeah. It's not unwise to be putting money away for savings and investing when you're paying off debt. It's just like an allocation of where your money is going.
Exactly. And to even maybe add a somewhat more technical piece, or those of you that don't want a technical answer, you can just tune me out for the next minute. But for those that want maybe even a more technical answers, it really depends on the rates. So your interest rates on the debt and what you can make, for example, as an investment return. So I'll give you an example. If you're paying 21% interest on credit card debt, the best return you could make on an investment conservatively is maybe 7-8%, which means there's a differential, let's take 21% versus 7%, of 14%. So for every dollar you save, instead of paying down that debt, you're actually losing 7%. Does that make sense? So you want to look at those differentials. However, if your debt is, say, around 4% or 5%, then you can probably beat it by investing it at, say, 6%. So in that case, it's actually better to save it than it is to pay off the debt. You need to pay off your debt, but you can do them together. So it's important to really learn to understand, if you want to do this well, to understand your interest rates and to understand what you can make by investing it in a safe way versus what you can do in paying off your debt. And then paying off, if the debt interest rate is higher than what you can do on the return, always pay off the debt first. So that's a very technical answer. If I lost you guys, I could try to explain it in person maybe. But I think Courtney's entry-level answer of do all three is a good place to start if I confused you.
Sweet.
Adam asks a really great question. He says, what about situations where you're not in active control of your investments, particularly what exactly your money is invested in and what funds are invested in ethically dubious ventures? For sure. Investing has ethical and moral consequences because by definition in investing, you're supporting companies that are doing different activities. Now, depending on who you are and what particular things the Lord has laid on your heart, you're going to have a different response to different things. But the good news, this is really cool, is major investing organizations like Wealthsimple, Questrade, and others have realized that ethical investing is really important to their clients. And so, for example, if you set up Robo-Investing or invest in one of those platforms, you can actually tell them, I want to invest in environmentally friendly corporations, or I want to avoid these types of unethical practices, which is really quite incredible. So that's kind of a cool thing that's come out of the industry in the last couple of years.
I didn't know that,
The challenge is that once you get into investing, to be completely honest, is that the market of the world is corrupt, and at some level there is going to be a brokenness in the system somewhere. Most corporations are going to have things that we're going to struggle with. So this is a really complex subject, and I recognize that transparently. But fortunately, there is some bright lights there. So did you have a question you wanted to tackle?
Sure. Why don't we look at grams? Do cryptocurrencies count as an investment? Because I'm really interested to know what the answer is.
The answer is they're a great way to lose your money. Do not buy Bitcoin unless you're really looking to lose all your money. That's not an investment. That's called gambling. We're interested in investing wisely and not gambling. So if you want to, lose all your money, great, go for it. This is a great one.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations or rules of thumb about how to divide your savings between flexible, long-term retirement and investments? I don't know rules of thumb. I can just think of for my own self. I don't know.
I think a rule of thumb that I work with is I try to roughly put the same into long-term as in retirement.
Okay.
But when I get larger sums, I tend to put them into the retirement savings. I remember I said last time when I get my tax return back, we give a third, we save a third, and we invest a third in our family. That save a third, we put into our retirement savings.
Okay.
So it's getting those big shots in, because that really has potential if it grows. I think a good basis is for long-term and your retirement, try to put the same amount in every month. $400, $200, $50, whatever it is. That's probably a reasonable place to start. That said, it gets really technical when you start to get into the real math of this, because there's tax implications and all kinds of things. But if you want to just get the ball rolling, start there, and then you can always talk to a financial advisor, and they might suggest otherwise based on your specific situation.
So the start would be the same in long-term and retirement, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just file something into emergency funds every month. That doesn't have to be as large. That can be, depending on your story, it could be quite small, it could be quite large. But the most important ones are those long-term and the retirement. Your emergency funds, you just kind of want to build up a fund there of, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever is appropriate for you. So,
Sweet.
Yeah.
Brooke, I don't remember an app off the top of my head, but Dan Trafford does. So if you see him, ask him.
Sophia asked, do you recommend buying property with a group of people, whether family and friends, to save cost? Question, let me tackle that one?
Sure.
Okay. The answer is it depends. So I've actually purchased property in a group situation before. As long as the terms are clearly set out at the beginning of the project, and you're clear on what the objectives are, and you have a good, similar approach to finances. So that's really important. You want to have clear terms, so clear like what if, and you want to have a similar approach to finances. So similar kind of mentality. So in the group projects that I've been in, that's how we've approached it, is we kind of think the same way, we have really clear terms. The other thing I would say is assume everything's going to go wrong. And then plan up front for that. So make sure that everybody understands not what happens if it goes right, but what happens if it goes wrong. It can be quite tricky. That said, we're actually encouraging people to consider group buying in terms of buying houses in our church. For many people, buying a house with other people in our church family may be the way that they break into the market for the first time, since home buying is so expensive. Laura and I were blessed to buy when it was cheap, but it's not as cheap as it used to be. And so for many of you, going in together, 2 or 3 people, may be the way to go. And the good news is banks are much more understanding of that than they were even 5 years ago. So they're more keen to give those kinds of mortgages for shared. The key is just to define it up front. So,
sweet. There's also part 2, or a second question that Sophia had. For international students, do you recommend saving in more than one country if possible? And would also love to hear from other international students so they can comment. But what do you think?
I'm going to go with I don't know on this one. I would need to think about it a little bit. I think the one thing I would say is it depends quite a bit on exchange rates and the rules. It's very complicated, and I'm not a sufficient expert to really comment on that. Sorry, Soph. I would be able to, maybe if I was able to understand some of the specifics, share a bit of thought, but I think that's really where an expert would be the route I would go. So I'm gonna wave the right flag on that one. It's a great question. So.
Couple people typing.
Erica's asking, illiquid equals solid? Yes. So an illiquid asset is a solid asset, which means that you can't turn it to cash easily. Liquid equals easily turn to cash. Illiquid means you're stuck with it. So a GIC is actually often very illiquid. They usually have terms, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so GICs actually have the downside that they can be illiquid.
Okay. So Daniel just posted to track his budgeting. The app that he uses is Mint, and that's what I was referencing earlier about having an app that's linked to your savings account. So the remainder of $1 would go into your account. If you pay $2.50 on something, 50 cents will go into your savings account. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. Oh, and you can see saving goals and your progress. That's awesome. Cool.
There you go. I think at the heart of this is that a lot of people's eyes glaze over when it comes to saving and investing, but I cannot state how important financial literacy is. I think one of the primary reasons people get into trouble is they just don't understand.
Yeah.
They haven't taken the time to understand interest rates, rates of return, what different types of investments are, what their different bank accounts are. I've talked to a lot of people that put their funds into a registered account like an RRSP and a TFFA and then don't do anything with it. They just leave it as cash, thinking that they're doing the right thing. And it's like, well, you're like, the hardest part is done, but the most important part is not yet done, which is the getting it to work for you. So.
Yeah, hopefully this was helpful, though, to get people started, get people thinking about what to do. And yeah.
So, and just start. Start early. Don't get overwhelmed. And ask questions. And I think that's a good place to start. So.
Yeah. What's a good starting investment?
I'm not exactly sure what that question entails. A good place to start investing would be first make sure your registered accounts are set up, your big savings accounts. And then if I was going to point someone in a direction, I would point them to, as a starting place for most people, would be like a Wealthsimple or a Questrade where it's automatically invested. It's very easy to do, and as long as you can just do a couple of hours of reading, you can get a lot of the way there. And so, yeah, that would be where I would. If I was to say start there, I'd say start by doing some reading on the automatic investing platforms. For most people.
Yeah, I'm like a beginner investor, and I use Wealthsimple because it's really easy, and I'm not as experienced to, I guess, do all the other fancy stuff. So I like Wealthsimple. It's good.
So personally, I do a mix of things. One cool hack for the parents out there, this is really important. You get a child benefit check every month. The government pays you to have children. It's great. Don't spend that money. What Laura and I do is we take the check that the government gives us and we put it straight into a different kind of registered account called an RESP, a Registered Education Savings Plan, where the government guarantees a 20% return by topping it up automatically for you. So it's like one of the best investments in the world. It is phenomenal. The cool thing is if you do the math and you just put in every child benefit check that you get from the government, your kid will have easily $100,000 to pay for their education by the time they start when they're 17. Easily.
Wow.
What that functionally means is that if you start as a parent when you're young, education is free in Canada, at least an undergraduate education. But most people end up spending their child benefit checks. Don't spend them, put them in an RESP, start today. Kai's first 2 years of school she's 3.5, she's already paid for them. Wow. And I haven't put $1 of my own money into it.
That's incredible.
100% just my child benefit check every month. So that is a really important hack, and I just wish everybody did it because we wouldn't have people graduating with nearly as much debt. So can you recommend any books to read, to research? Lisa says don't have kids. So you get, the thing is the put the child benefit check in the investment means you don't get the benefit of it, so you're not going to have kids, so you get the check. Oh, no joke. Anyway, Adam asks, any good books to read to research investing? To be honest, I haven't read any full-length books on this. Most of mine has been trial and error and a lot of like reading on the web. Also, I was blessed to have really financially literate people. I grew up around investors and those types of things. So I will get back to you on that, unless you have a couple good books.
I don't, so we'll get back to you.
Sarah says it does not even out financially. So, one of the challenges with good investing books is that most teaching on investing isn't adequately coupled from a kingdom standpoint to teaching on giving. Yeah. Giving without investing is just greed. Or sorry, investing without giving is just greed. So, yes, child rearing is expensive.
I assume so.
But if you're a parent and you don't have an RRSP for your kids, set it up. I don't know which parents are watching, but set it up. So I think that's a wrap.
Yeah,
that's
sweet.
Investing.
Thanks for the questions. They were great.
Yeah, really good questions. And yeah, I love you guys. I do have a couple, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, a couple decent kingdom-oriented investing books on my desk that I can hook you up with if anyone's interested. I just can't remember the name of them offhand. So okay, cool. All right, guys, be blessed. We'll be back next week when we talk about consuming. Ooh. What do we spend our money on? So finally, after starting with budgeting, debt, giving, saving, investing, we're going to talk about spending next week. That's going to be good. So we'll see you then.
Bye, guys.